Knockout City's pitch is both straightforward and unique. Take a game of 3v3 dodgeball and make it as extra as possible. But I can see how a lot of different people might make the mistake of writing that simple pitch off. Even though there aren't a whole lot of developers making games about dodgeball, I can see how someone might assume from screenshots that it's yet another dime a dozen competitive shooter just replacing the guns with rubber balls. And on the other side of the spectrum, next to super serious competitive titles like Counter-Strike or a MOBA, maybe a game about street punks playing dodgeball with a kid-friendly aesthetic sounds a little bit twee to the hardcore audience. Of course, you would be entirely wrong in both those assumptions. While Knockout City's pitch is weird enough that it makes marketing a challenge, it's also unique enough that this game is truly special. In actual action, Knockout City is one part shooter, one part sport, and one part fighting game. A unique experience that echoes each of these genres, but doesn't quite fit into any one of them. And I'm here to assure you that its unique take on competitive multiplayer is phenomenal and absolutely worth checking out for hardcore and casual players alike. Because Knockout City is everything I could ever want out of a competitive game. It has all the tactical crunch these other games have without the required hundreds of hours of investment. It's fun from practically the very first moment. It's easy to pick up, but hard to master. It has lightning fast matches that almost never become blowouts, and it has a heavy emphasis on working cooperatively with your team. This game has everything, folks, and I desperately want to sell you on it. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today we're dodgebrawling head-to-head in Knockout City. Nailing down exactly what Knockout City is in a sentence is a little challenging. At first glance, you might think it's a third-person shooter, but there isn't a whole lot of actual shooting that goes on. The entire game runs on an auto-lock system, so you'll never once have to aim, never care about getting sick headshots, and most fights are so up close that cover doesn't ever figure in. For a shooter fan, the only things that will feel familiar here are the map layout and the fact that projectiles exist. What Knockout City feels a lot more like in spirit is a fighting game. Here again, it doesn't have a lot of the genre's most visible surface-level traits. You won't be running a sick 20-hit combo off of somebody's face with a dodgeball, or unleashing a big cinematic super that sends them flying across the screen. But it's a fighting game in spirit, requiring all the same mind games, footsie positioning, and thought processes to succeed in its surprisingly intricate and complicated dance. So, let's lay out how that dance works. At its most basic, everybody has 2 health. Apply dodgeball to face twice and you nab a kill. But then you add in a dodge roll, and a catch that works like a parry, and a charge system that has echoes of Lethal League, where every time you catch a ball, you can throw it back faster and faster. And then on top of that, add in not just 1, but 3 different ways to change up the tempo of your attacks and bait out your opponent's defensive options, and then the ability to sling a ball around or over cover if you're clever. When you throw all of those different abilities together and you have 2 people using their full suite of options while going at it, yeah, the dance can start getting pretty intricate and complicated. It's absolutely fantastic. And that's all without even getting in a team play, which opens up a wealth of other options. Passing balls between teammates similarly charges them up so you can throw them faster, and then there's Knockout City's most delightfully absurd mechanic of all, where you can become the ball and have a teammate throw you directly at the enemy. Above all, Knockout City is a team game, and as complicated as a one-on-one engagement can be, it all gets even more tactically gratifying when you add all the potential deviousness of having a partner to bounce off of. It can be as simple as tossing a ball to your flanking teammate so they can hit someone in their exposed back, or you can go as complex as building your own basketball team formation with someone in back tossing balls up to the frontline fighters so they can focus purely on offense. And we're not even done yet, because on top of everything I just described, there are special ball types all with their own effects, with a particular standout being the cage ball that, instead of doing damage, forces whoever you hit into ball form. And then you get to beat the enemy team over the head with their own teammate, or, if you're out of targets, just spike them off the map while they're helpless. Gotcha. So that's a lot, right? That probably sounds like a lot, especially if it's all getting thrown at you all at once. And it does take an hour or 2 to wrap your head around and remember all these different options you can use, but crucially, it's actually not that hard to pull all of this off. I already mentioned how the game handles all its targeting through a lock-on feature. It is virtually impossible to actually miss when throwing a dodgeball unless your opponent is actively dodging. But Knockout City also keeps things simple by making each of its many abilities only take 1 or 2 button presses to execute. It doesn't really care about your ability to mechanically execute, but more your tactical acumen, improvisational skills, and ability to engage in team play. Which is to say, in fewer, more jargony words, that this game has a remarkably low skill floor while maintaining a respectable ceiling. Especially once you start discovering some of the downright dirty ways you can dunk on an opponent. But I haven't even gotten to the best meta decisions of all. Everything I just described, all that juicy tactical wrangling and high-level team play, you can experience it all in a match that runs under 10 minutes. Matches of Knockout City are lightning fast. They're played kind of like games of tennis. First to 10 points wins the round, best of 2 rounds out of 3 takes the whole match. And that might seem like a weird and random thing to nerd out about in a review, but it does so much to elevate the game as an experience. If you've only got an hour to play, you still get to go through a lot of matches instead of queuing up for just 1 or 2 and hoping they're good games. And most interestingly, it's really hard to have a blowout match where one team can't hope to catch up again. If you have a bad fight or two, well, the round's over and you're back at a clean slate. Maybe you can get them next time. And with the score to win so low, you can only ever really get 2 or 3 points ahead before the round is over. Still well within striking distance for an upset. Just systemically, the game is designed to make it so that anyone can always mount a comeback, but the more consistent team still wins out in the end, so it never feels unfair. You will never experience that miserable slog that so many multiplayer games can run afoul of where you've lost in the first 5 minutes but still have to spend the next 20 waiting for the game to end. It just doesn't happen here, and for someone like me who greatly values their time, that is a godsend. There's really not a whole lot for me to nitpick with this one either. The worst I can think of is that because you always want to stick with your team, there's a tendency for half the match to kind of just happen in one spot of the map with all the players throwing 3 balls around between themselves, as opposed to really exploring and utilizing the entire play space. But honestly, the better I get at the game, the less I'm running into that issue, and even if it does devolve into a meat grinder in the middle of the map, it's still a fun meat grinder to participate in. And I guess the aesthetic can be a little hit or miss sometimes. It's kind of like somebody decided to make a line of Bratz dolls, but like the Street Punk edition. It doesn't look bad by any means, but I'm obviously not the target audience for this, and the customization options to start are so limited that everyone kind of looks the same right now. One thing that helps is the game's free battle pass, which went with the unique move of randomly shuffling the rewards around for each level. So that's nice because everybody's getting entirely different cosmetics on day 1, but I imagine that's also going to be a bit of a polarizing decision. I kind of like it though. But with all of that said, let's get to the big question. What do you get out of 5 hours with Knockout City? And the answer is a ton. It's a multiplayer game with no story to speak of whatsoever, so you can play it for as long or little as you like. And with how short individual matches are, you'll be able to run through dozens of games in an afternoon. This is a phenomenal game for anyone strapped for time or groups of friends that might only have a few hours to hang out together. There's still a lengthy battle pass grind that might be a deal breaker if you're the sort of person that needs all the cosmetics, but for someone who just wants to sit down and play a competitive game, who just wants to get in there with their friends and have fun, Knockout City is near perfect. And if you jump on board right now, you can even test the game out for free. The game launched with a sort of 10-day trial period where anybody can have full access to the game at no cost. So if it does sound interesting, go check it out, because I absolutely recommend Knockout City. This is some of the most addicting fun I've had with a multiplayer game in a long time. Hey, if you enjoyed this review as much as I enjoyed Knockout City, consider supporting me on Patreon. With your generous support, I can start doing all kinds of cool stuff, like more in-depth video essays and 5-hour streams where I review games like this in real time. So if any of that sounds cool, please consider becoming a patron today. But I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.